committee meeting, virtual meeting. I will get started with welcoming everyone without saying Happy New Year, because I think we're well past that point now. We'll just get cracking. So agenda item number 1 is chair's announcements. You'll be pleased to know I haven't got any announcements, but I would just like to remind you all that the meeting is being recorded to ensure that all phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. When asked to raise your hand, if you could try and remember to do it electronically, that would be helpful. It would help with the sequencing of questions as well. And also to remind you that Welsh translation is available for this meeting should any member wish to speak in Welsh, which is obviously welcome and good practice for me too, because I'm still learning. Okay, thank you very much. So that's item 1. I'm going to move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Just, are there any declarations of interest based on the agenda at the moment? I'll remind you if any do come up during the meeting to let me know at the time. Can't see any, Alison, so I'm going to move on. Agenda item 3, minutes of previous meeting. To approve the minutes of the meeting on the 21st of November 2024. Any comments, please, on the minutes? No comments, no hands up, so I'm going to assume they're all acceptable. Can I have somebody, do I need somebody to propose the minutes, please? Thank you, Peter, and seconded David, thank you, and we'll accept that. Yeah, okay, going through, Alison, no problem with the minutes. Unanimous there from the committee. So we move on to the first item of business, I suppose, item 4, financial monitoring, Q2 and Q3. So I think we were going to have Steve address us on this, were we, Alison? Although I saw Chris Moore's joined.
Yes, yep. Chair, Steve's as aware.
Yes, me, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Do you want to?
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I just propose to run through the Q3 report as the most up-to-date position of the CJC, and it's reasonably, well, quite similar to the Q2 position anyway. So the Q2 report begins on page 13 of the report pack, but I draw your attention to Appendix A on page 17. So this report details the forecasted Q3 financial monitoring and projected year-end position for the current financial year, and this will be presented to Joint Committee later this month, well, next week actually. So as you're aware, 23rd of January 2024, the Joint Committee approved a 24-25 budget, which was set at 615,000, with a levy from each of the constituent authorities, and then this was reduced through the utilisation of reserves by 10%, leaving 556,000 to raise through the levy. We also have a Welsh Government grant this year of £100,000. Last year we had 125,000, and we fully expect to utilise all this grant this year. So as you can see from the appendix, we're fully expecting to utilise all 4 subcommittee budgets this year as well, which then, if I draw your attention to the bottom of the appendix, it shows that we have projecting a surplus of 128,000 this year. There's a few reasons for this. One of the main ones that within support services, this is underspent by roughly 44,000 due to the budgeted senior accountant post remaining vacant as due to the level of activity within CJC. The subcommittee expenditure, that's underspent by 87,000, and this is in respect of the underspend on the planning and programme management expenditure. Moving on to the regional management office, this is underspent by roughly 60,000. Main reason being 53,000 underspend on consultancy and specialist advisor work not being needed or commissioned, and then some small underspends on printing, copy and office consumables, ITC and computer hardware. But as I said, look at the bottom of the appendix, we can see that we've been accumulating reserves since the beginning of the CJC. This is due to the limited activity. So we are anticipating that these reserves will be in the region of 970,000 at the end of this financial year. So that's my brief but whistle-stop tour of the Q3, and then that will then feed into the budget report for 25-26, which I believe Chris is going to take next. But I'm open for any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. We do have a couple of questions, but
Okay.
to be honest with you, as you've said, they link more into the next item 5, in terms of the draft budget proposal. So what I'd suggest is, if there's nothing that hasn't been brought to my attention before now, then we'll move on to item 5, and we'll note the financial monitoring.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, everyone happy with that? Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll move on to item 5, only because I think it makes more sense, Steve, for us to discuss it in terms of the draft budget, please. All right, so thank you. So did you say Chris was going to take the draft budget?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to take this. The draft budget is brought to you prior to it being presented to the JJC later this month. There's a statutory obligation that the budget must be set before the end of January, and that we must notify the constituent authorities of the appropriate levy. So it's brought to you today for your opinion on it and any engagement that you wish in respect to the budget. The budget does propose a way forward, and you will see within the budget papers that there were 2 options really considered in terms of the actual budget itself. One was where we've been the last couple of years of a continuity budget, or a bit of a standstill budget in terms of doing the minimum amount of work, and the other one was expanding on the work streams in terms of some of the work that the work streams are doing and need to do moving forward. You will be also aware that the actual transport work stream has had support through Welsh Government of, over the last 2 years, 250,000, which has actually allowed the RTP to move forward in that respect. The appendix contains 3 options: Appendix A, B and C. The Appendix A is based on the continuity budget, and the Appendix B and C are based on the requested budget. And the difference mainly between the 2 is we've brought in the consideration of utilising some reserves to support the budget in C, which then tries to control the levy. In informal conversations with the leaders or the JGC members, one of the things that have been considered is the implications on the constituent authorities. And as we all know, the actual pressure in terms of budgets on the constituent authorities is quite heavy going at the moment. And there's whilst we've had a reasonable settlement from Welsh Government at 4.3 average across Wales, there are some significant challenges and costs that actually don't match against that settlement, and therefore I think all the constituent authorities are looking for ways of trying to sort of control or reduce spend. So that's really why then we brought in the 2 options. So if I go through the requested budget as we refer to it, the requested budget is actually based on feedback from the work streams and what they feel they need to deliver on the various elements across the 4 different disciplines. The only thing I would say is strategic planning is quite a heavy one, and there is a desire from that work stream that Welsh Government supports that work stream as they have supported the strategic development plan in the previous years, and the estimated cost of delivering the full work stream is more in the region of 600,000. So they've come to the conclusion that actually that should be a pursuance and a negotiation with Welsh Government before they can deliver on that. So therefore the full strategic development plan will not be delivered until further conversation has taken place with Welsh Government on that. So therefore the request from them is slightly more controlled than it would be should they be delivering the whole of the strategic development plan. But there is a strong view that there should be support there from Welsh Government in respect to that. The other point that I would make is that, as I would have said in the early years of setting up the CJCs, there is an obligation on the national parks, that's Brecon Beacons and Pembrokeshire, to contribute towards any planning functions that go on. Admittedly, the planning functions are nominal at the moment, but it is felt that we ought to bring that into the levy calculation at the moment. And whilst actually you'll notice the figures are minimal, they are based at the moment purely on the planning function. That will develop over a period of time, over the future years, but it's actually setting the principle in place more than anything than the actual cash value of what we will recoup at this point in time. That is the allocation has been done on the basis of population at the moment, but there would be alternatives which would be heavier. But actually what is felt at the moment is that's a reasonable approach that actually we should adopt there overall. So you've got, as I say, you've got the requested budget, you've got detail within the report around what will be delivered by the 4 work streams. And then if I take you to Appendix B and C, there are 2 fundamental differences between that, and that is what we actually put into the equation in respect of reserves. So going through some of the other costs within the Appendix B and C, there's pretty much consistency in terms of the joint committee costs, the scrutiny costs, etc., support costs, and also the staffing costs year on year, where there's only been inflationary rises. The main thing that's actually moved slightly is around the workstream costs, and those have been bedded into the report. But you've got 2 options there, both actually coming out with a cost of for next year of 710,000. But the only difference then is Appendix 3 makes a suggestion that we bring back the levy to the levy that was actually charged for current year. So we hold the levy at the same cash value year on year going into next year. Now the proposal is recognizing that, as Steve mentioned earlier, that there's actually potentially 974,000 in the reserve, whilst we actually want to hold the reserve for a period of time. The figure is allocated in terms of a reserve movement over the 3 years, so that we stand at the same level for those 3 years in terms of the levy. So you will see that actually at the bottom of Appendix C, there's a contribution of 153,000 proposed for next year, 167 the following year, 182. So that's actually managing the inflationary items and holding the levy the same. What they'll still give us an estimated provision of 460,000 in reserves at the end of that period, and that is required really because there are very much unknowns over the next 3 years in terms of potential costs that may come from the development of the work streams that we're not particularly aware of at the moment. I think the other thing is that whilst we're looking at a 3-year plan, I think it's critical that we do that in terms of a prudence approach, on the basis if we're applying a substantial contribution from reserve this year of 153,000, we need to be considering that next year and the year after, because certainly the constituent authorities are not going to be in a better position next year or the year after in terms of their own financial affairs. So to actually do a one-off contribution which was higher than that, and then actually hit a challenge in year 2 and 3 in terms of funding the CJC going forward, I think would be an imprudent move, and that's why I've suggested that actually there's a discharge of the reserves over the 3-year period. So I hope you can understand some of the thinking behind where we've got to. We do have the risk around the planning at the moment in terms of the funding, but that's further negotiation with Welsh Government before we bottom out on that at the moment. And the feedback from the work stream is that they are content with that. So I think the critical things really is around the budget is the recognition of moving forward within the work streams, the limitation of the planning work stream to some extent, the use of reserves to hold the levy over a 3-year period, and actually bringing the national parks into the equation, whilst actually on a small contribution at the moment, establishing the principle within the funding mechanism going forward. So at that point, I'll really take any questions, but hopefully that gives you a reasonable overview of the thinking and the work that's been done in terms of preparing the budget to get to this stage. Diolch.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. That's a very helpful overview of the position and the report. We do have a few questions from members, which I'll bring them in now. Sean, I can't see you on my screen, but I hope you're there. You were.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Over to you, please.
Okay, diolch.
Councillor Percy.
Thanks. Yeah, so obviously I'm looking at the Appendix C now in terms of the requested budget there with the use of reserves, and sort of noting what you've said there, Chris. You know, the discussion we had in pre-brief around this is you know, there's a lot of reserves sitting there, and you know, they've arisen as a result of, you know, budgets that weren't necessarily accurate budgets. You know, in one sense you could say it was favourable that we didn't overspend, but we've been underspending significantly year on year. And in the last year's budget, you know, we planned to spend reserves then, and we've ended up £120,000 in surplus. So it's, you know, forgive me maybe for not feeling super confident about the forecast about us spending the reserves going forward. You know, there's certain line items there, particularly I think there's that financial officer has been mentioned, the spending on planning are probably the two big ones that have been sitting there year after year in the budget and been underspent. Now, from the work we've done in our own local authorities, you know, it's not good practice to be budgeting for items that you don't spend. You know, the budget should be accurate, and obviously the ultimate result of this has been money has been flowing from the local authorities into the CJC and sitting there while we're making quite difficult decisions in the constituent authorities. So there's perhaps my point out of the way, but in terms of a question, how confident are we going forward of the accuracy of the budget, in particular the forecasting on those items that we've been consistently underspending on? So, you know, are we confident we're going to be appointing an officer into that role? And if we're not, then, you know, should that be in the budget? Likewise, what is our degree of confidence around spending that money on that planning item over the next few years? Because I certainly don't feel particularly confident when you look back retrospectively at all the budgets we've seen so far that we've got accurate figures in there. Diolch.
Diolch. Yeah, I think the starting point really is that actually the budget was put together initially on a blank piece of canvas, and at the moment we don't really know where the CJC is going to go in terms of how active it's going to be and how much change will take place. You will be aware, for instance, from probably the transport side, that actually there's a proposal from Welsh Government at the moment that all the allocation of the transport grants go through the CJC and transport workstream and get reallocated. So we're very much, the CJC is developing, and what the thought process was originally is that, and it still is, that we don't want to be in a position where the CJC can't deliver on anything that's required for the lack of budget. And therefore we made assumptions on what we needed. Now, good prudent management during the period, then if we don't need it, we don't spend it, and therefore it's better to hold it that way. So am I confident that we won't have some underspends in the future? No. Am I confident actually that we're not going to get into the year and planning's going to turn around and say Welsh Government is going to fund the requirement to put the strategic plan in place? No. And if that is the case, on the one side, yeah, we could be underspending, but on the other side, there could be a request during the year from the strategic planning team to actually have a substantial contribution to get the strategic planning over the line. And when I get indications from the that work stream that actually the total cost of delivering that could be in the region of 600,000. The reserves that we're carrying are not that significant overall, so it's trying to manage that where you've got an element of prudency around the overall approach. But we have gone through phases where, you know, before Christie was appointed, we had a void there in terms of staffing, and we were struggling. So there are elements that are going to go up and down. Is the question of how tight you want to make the budget to actually deliver on, and you know, I feel that this budget allows the flexibility of what we require. Yes, it may end up there's a slight underspend at the end of the year, but actually it's set in a better pace for the future. And actually, as a consequence of the reserves this year, we're able to hold the levy at the same levy as charged last year, as opposed to putting it in an increase in. So there are swings and roundabouts there. You specifically picked up on a finance post, sorry, did you?
Yeah, I think that's one of the underspends that's been in place for a few years. Have I got the correct post? Is it a senior officer or something that's not been appointed into post but budgeted for since
That's right, yeah.
the first budget?
Which post is that, Steve? Sorry.
It's a senior accountancy post. At the moment, I'm covering the role, and some of my because main part of my costs go to the Swansea-based city deal, with a small element coming across to the CJC.
So at the moment we're sharing, Steve, but actually as the work increases and we don't know whether we may need that extra support. You know, I mentioned the transport allocation, and I think that on its own, in terms of the allocation and the process there, won't call on it. But actually, if you had further initiatives like that, where there's more and more being processed through there, 100% it could we could need that role. But so yeah, it's a budget that's actually set in a manner that's prudent, that puts the protection in place. But actually, yes, there will be some underspends, but we are actually in an area where the CJC is developing, and there is more and more call on the CJC over a period of time. So, you know, I don't know whether that gives you assurance that actually it's on the right side or not. But that's really where the consensus has come at the moment with my liaison with the leaders.
Thanks, Chris, for that. Are you happy with that answer, Councillor Percy?
Do you mind if I come back, Chair? Is that okay?
No, I don't mind. That's fine. Come on, carry on.
Diolch. No,
Peter, I'll bring you in next.
No, thanks, Chris. I appreciate I understand where you're coming from with this, and I do get that. I think, you know, you kind of made the comment around, well, how tight do you want the budget to be? And yes, the CJC's currently got lots of flexibility in the way that this is set out, because of that reserve balance, because of the underspends that have been coming through. I think the point I'm making is around the accuracy of the budget in itself. And I think, you know, if we know we're not going to be appointing an officer, we shouldn't be budgeting for an officer. That's just not good practice. And that wouldn't be acceptable in our local authority budgets, to have an item year on year on year. And I get the idea of things sometimes we don't anticipate, or we might underspend on a specific scheme. And I also really appreciate the first budget was very much a blank sheet of paper, and we didn't know, you know, where we were going. But we've had a few budgets now, and it doesn't feel like we're really, you know, there's not much of an iterative approach in terms of taking items out. We've tweaked a little. And yes, I think you're right in the sense of, okay, because of the reserve balance, we're not calling on local authorities, but actually we've already paid that money in. So this is money that's already come in from the local authorities out of our budgets already. So yes, there might be a less of a call on the local authorities now in, you know, the next 2 or 3 years, but that's money that we've already put in, that actually we didn't need to have put into the CJC budget over the last 3 years. And that's the point I'm making. And I'm not sure that the current approach is the right approach in terms of setting an accurate budget that puts, you know, the correct degree of burden on the local authorities at the time. And I think whilst there are big work streams coming up, they're not necessarily all 1 year schemes either. So if the budget needs to be revised, the budget gets revised at that point in time. That's how we'd work in the local authority world, and I'm just a little bit perhaps just not entirely comfortable with the approach that's being taken at the moment.
Okay, and well, I'll take that on board. I'll have a conversation afterwards and talk to the leaders about it. That's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I think that's, I mean, before I bring you in, Peter, I think everyone's frustration with the whole CJC process, which we've expressed to the board before in letters, is about this uncertainty that we face with the fact that the systems have been set up, but then it's not being properly resourced. So I think, Chris is trying to present a budget with, was it the Donald Rumsfeld known unknowns? There are lots of things we know we don't know, and we have to try and budget for. And I think it makes it very difficult to then have that prudency that you're talking about, when actually in the next breath we might need to do a lot of work quite quickly. But I take the point that then it could be reviewed. So I think that's all very helpful. Thank you, Sean. So Peter.
I think
Go
just
on, Chris,
one point. I think you'll recall last year, as part of the process, we looked at what was the optimum sort of functionality of the CJC, and it went up well over $1 million on what we actually got at the moment. So the challenge is what is the scope of the CJC and where are we going to land eventually is my big challenge. Personally, I think a lot of what the CJC is doing could be done with the local authorities with just collaboration. But we have the CJC system, we have the CJC process, and we've got to actually manage our way through that. And that is really the challenge. But yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Peter, thanks for your patience. I'll bring you in next.
Yeah, thanks. I really support what Sean was saying, because I think it's important that we do get accurate budgeting. But I mean, we're at the situation now where the reserves are basically 135% of the budget, which is quite excessive in anybody's. And so I appreciate the fact that you're looking to freeze the levy for the next 3 years and to use some of those reserves to bolster that. But I do think that given the extent of the reserves, maybe we should be looking at reducing the levy, because the local authorities themselves could use that money rather than have it sit in the reserves.
Chris, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That is a possibility. You could reduce it. I'm looking at the medium-term financial planning, and what I don't want to do is reduce the levy and then you have a bigger impact year on year next year or the year after, because then you'll be even more challenged. So all these pros and cons have actually been discussed with the leaders. It is challenging. And I think personally, I think the worst scenario you could have is where you didn't actually charge a levy on 1 year, and then you got actually a massive increase the following year. I think with the management of budgets, there is far more sense in being prudent and having incremental movements than actually significant drifts. And it was felt actually through discussion that keeping the levy the same was a reasonable approach. The impact on the individual authorities is not significant, but it still allows the scope for development of the CJC.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chris. I understand that. Peter, did you want to come back?
Yeah, that's the full response. But I mean, I'm not proposing that you don't charge a levy at all. I'm just saying that but you can make that levy up as we start to develop. I just feel that we should have a reduction. That's all.
Okay. As I say, we've discussed this with the leaders, but I'll go back and I'll feed back to the leaders on some of these points. But I may even have to feed back in the meeting, because the meeting's next Wednesday, I think.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tron, you've been very patient as well. Can I bring you in next?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I wasn't at this section of the pre-meet, so I wasn't aware what questions were going to be asked, but I was in support of the previous two speakers in general, because I do feel the money in the reserves is money the councils have already put in. So I mean, it's cut in the levy, but it is money that's already been paid in at a time when we're desperately in need of it. Chris did mention the 4.2 AEF, but a lot of councils, including ours, we're under that. So we still got a huge budget gap to find. Just a question for Chris, and I thanks for all the work on this, Chris. But you mentioned, for example, the strategic plan was 600,000 for completion. But in the minutes from the last meeting, we did discuss it. It was said the cost of repairing an SDP in the region is in the region of 2.5 million, which we don't have the funding or the officer's resource to complete unless Welsh Government really, if I say it in a wrong way, but pull their finger out and put the fund in there if they want it delivered. I don't think we can keep budgeting for this. We got to do what we've done so far and put it on the back burner and leave it until it's given serious consideration of funding from Welsh Government. So if that means reducing the budget further and having to face it a different day, then so be it. But I certainly go for the lowest possible levy for each of the authorities, and if that means using reserves over the next 3 years, which you've alluded to, then that has to be done. I just don't see the point in carrying on paying lip service to this, and it's not really. I don't mean that disrespectfully to any officers putting the work in. I know that they're all very diligent, working very hard at it, but I just feel myself, and I think others would feel as well. This is a project, a vanity project set up by Welsh Government, and they're not really supporting it. They're expecting authorities to bend over backwards to make it work, and we can't afford it at the moment. It's something which authorities need to perhaps just stand up and say, look, we can't afford to do this unless Welsh Government fund it. So that's my views. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor John. Chris, did you want to come in?
Yeah, okay, thanks on that. Yeah, I think the point about the 2.5 million, the more recent sort of budget request back from my recollection was 600,000. Steve, I don't know whether you got more information, because I think you're right that 2.5 million has been mentioned previously.
Yeah, I think it was close to 600,000 per year.
Per year. Yeah, that makes sense. So it is quite a burdensome area, and this is the challenge, is that we're working with the unknown, and I sort of agree with you, Councillor John, in terms of the planning has put it on the back burner to the extent that they haven't even put the bid in for the 600,000 at the moment, but actually you don't know what may take place over the next 6 months in terms of a demand from Welsh Government, in terms of, or a statutory requirement that we must deliver something. And this is the thing, it's CJCs are developing, and it's a bit of a juggling act in terms of where we end up in terms of the overall position. We have tried hard, I think, or the leaders have tried hard to sort of do minimum because of the cost being excessive. But once a piece of legislation comes out of Welsh Government, then we've got to respond to it.
If I can come back, Chair, quickly, and I won't take too much time up, but I appreciate that, Chris, and it is a challenge. But Welsh Government can't expect councils to do all that they've got to do with the current funding. Councils are looking at statutory failure on several fronts at the moment, including education, social services, and other issues. If some of the cuts we have to make go through, it's a real worrying time. And if it's statutory failure on this or services to the people of Pembrokeshire via social service or education, I think I'd prioritise social service and education over this, which I do think is a vanity project at the moment. It's sucking up funds, and I don't see where it's going. But perhaps I'm too negative with it. But there we are. Sorry.
No,
Thank you, Councillor John.
Helpful comments. Thank you.
Sorry to cut over you, Chris. Sean, I have seen your hand was up. Did you want to come back in, or you're all right?
No, I'm okay, no, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Councillor Percy, sorry. So, Chris, just if I could ask, because obviously, with the committee's feelings about the unknowns in the budgets are quite clear, I think. Just from your experience, Welsh Local Government Association and the other CJCs that you're talking to, are they facing the similar challenge to what we're facing, and have they come up with anything else different to try and address this? Because obviously we're all in the same situation to a certain extent across Wales.
Certainly from the conversations I've had, I think we're all very much in a similar position. We're sort of working through it bit by bit, and there are many unknowns. That I don't know, Steve. You sit on a project group with some of the others. Do you have any extra bits to add to that?
No, I think for the most part, the other CJCs are in the same position with the strategic development plan, that given the constraints of the budgets, that they are unable to progress any further other than through essentially a continuity budget until Welsh Government provide funding again. So I think, other than, I believe, potentially the South East CJC, that we are in similar position to the others then.
So just to clarify then, the Welsh government, we're still really, and we've said this before, we're still really waiting for Welsh Government to actually fund and clarify this a bit more. Your comments in item 4, Steve, you said it was £120,000 grant last year and £100,000 grant this year. So if anything, there's less funding coming in from Welsh Government to support the CJC work than there was previously. So any sign of anything changing in that? Any positives coming through, or are we still waiting?
I've seen nothing come through in terms of that was related specifically to transport. So that was after a lot of lobbying that they actually came up with that funding, and that funding did take the regional transport plan forward. But I've seen nothing else in terms of indication. I know the Southeast, Steve mentioned Southeast. They are trying to merge that between the growth deal and the CJC. Now, that's something in part that we are looking at in terms of options, in terms of some of the support areas. But at the moment, we have got 2 separate bodies defined, which is partly defined in legislation. But there is work going where we can merge some of the functionality going forward, because it does seem quite bizarre that we got the 2 functions. They are different, and because of what we've done with the growth deal, we've set the growth deal up where it's actually a defined period, defined delivery, which is slightly unlike Cardiff. So yes, whereas CJCs are going on indefinitely, but there is work to be done there as well. But yeah, it's all a bit of development and advancement, and as I mentioned on the transport grant allocation, that's worked for years through local authorities. All of a sudden now it's actually having to be going through regional JJC and regional allocations, which we're now going to have to structure an allocation basis through the regions as well.
Okay. So we're in the same situation we were in, effectively before. And thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So I think, Alison, can I clarify, are we noting this?
Yes, we are, Chair. I think that's what the recommendation refers to.
Okay. So we're perfect. Thank you very much.
And just on that point, I will accumulate the notes from the minutes and share those with the leaders and see whether they want a further discussion on amendment of any of the budgets.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, as well.
Thank
for
you.
your help with item 4 as well, and 5. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the update on the regional energy strategy delivery. We've got Darren Thomas. Are you going to lead us on this, Darren?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So let me just get my notes up. I will take you through the report, and I also want to let you know that Laura Davis, our Energy Project Manager for South West Wales region, is also in attendance in the meeting. And if there are any technical queries that I can't answer, hopefully she'll be able to help out. The energy report starts on page 33 of your pack. So the recommendation in front of you is that members note the progress updates on the energy work stream, and to note the request for funding for the solar group purchasing initiative. I will take you through this in more detail as I go through the report. So the background to this is that the Corporate Joint Committee resolved that the South West Wales Regional Energy Strategy be adopted as the framework for the CJC's work programme. And then last September, the energy subgroup noted that the local area energy plans, which are called LEAPs, will be the framework to deliver the regional energy strategy. Also to note that Welsh Government have funded for 24 months the appointment of a regional energy team consisting of an energy project manager who I've already referred to and is in this meeting, and also 2 energy project officer posts. So the regional energy team has been working across the regional actions in the strategy, and an update for those is shown in Appendix A. And since October, the energy team have been concentrating on prioritised projects which are described in more detail in this report and also in the appendices. So the LEAP Regional Steering Group has met on several occasions as an officer group. And what we've been doing is developing a strategic approach to managing the LEAPs. We've been looking at the grid capacity and opportunities from national grid electricity distribution. We had engagement with Net Zero Industry Wales in relation to the support of strategic industrial projects such as the Highline planning process and industrial clusters associated with the free ports. So the individual priority schemes are covered in the various appendices. Appendix B starts on page 39. Sorry, Appendix B is on page 41, my apologies. So that covers the solar PV battery storage and EV chargers proposal. There is detail in the appendix, which I'm not planning to go through in terms of my introduction, but of course, we'd be very happy to try and address any queries you may have, Chair or committee members. What the report is highlighting is that we'll be asking the CJC for funding of 27,500 in the 25-26 financial year, and £3,000 in this financial year as well. And the background and explanation to what that funding covers is in the appendix. The process for how that's being managed from a procurement point of view is through Carmarthenshire County Council as the lead body in this case. And the market engagement PIN, I have to highlight a slight change from what's in the text of your report. The PIN was posted on week commencing the 7th of January 2025, not on the 16th of December, as in the report. So if I could just highlight that change, please. So that's the solar PV battery storage and EV chargers proposal. Then the next scheme is in Appendix C, and that is the Regional Retrofit Behavioural Change Project, and the details of that in Appendix C. And then Appendix D covers the final project for this report, which is the cross-boundary sharing of EV charging infrastructure pilots between local authorities. So, Chair, in terms of a brief introduction to the report, that covers things. I'm very happy to try and address any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Darren. That's excellent. I know I do have a question coming in from Councillor Howlett, and over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren. I think this will be your last meeting. Maybe I'm stealing the Chair's thunder here, but Darren is leaving the council. Pembrokeshire County Council will be a big miss, and for that organisation and obviously for the CJC. So thank you for that, and thank you for the work you've done. In terms of my question, on page 41, it talks about the council branded mail shot to 78,000, well, about 78,500 properties across the region, using Experian Mosaic target groups. Now, as most of us will know, Mosaic groups are individuals likely to share demographics, lifestyles, and behaviours. It goes on to say that the Conservative conversion estimate of 0.41 or 321 properties, and if I'm reading it right, that cost about £27,500, which works out, again, if I'm reading it right, about £80 to £85 per property that's signed up. Now, I don't know if, on the face of it, that seems quite a low take-up rate. I'm fairly sceptical if something comes through my door from a company I don't know, but I noticed this was council branded, so I'd hope it would give some reassurance to people. So, it does seem possibly on the low side. So do we know, and maybe the questions I ask, the level of detail might not be available now, which I fully appreciate. Do we know, is that conversion rate of 0.41 comparable with other providers? As I say, should it have given it was council branded, more confidence for people to get involved and a higher rate? Are further mail shots planned? And if so, what lessons can we learn to try and get the conversion rate up? So sorry, a few questions there, but just something that got my interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howlett, and also your kind words and introduction. So I'm going to tee up Laura to come in. She's put her hand up. Before she comes in, a couple of points from me. First of all, this is also a scheme which is being run in the Cardiff City region, and we've been sort of trying to learn across from them and work with them so that we're all on the same page. So perhaps Laura will pick on that. And I also wanted to draw your attention, which you obviously have read anyway, but I'll just draw your attention to the key deliverables, which are on page 41, just below the section you were reading. So that highlights some of the benefits or deliverables that we're trying to achieve. If I bring in Laura, and hopefully she can add in a bit more technical detail. Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, this as far as we're aware, and from there's been a market engagement pin run by Cardiff just a bit ahead of ours. And basically this company, it's a Dutch company, it runs this scheme through Europe as well, has only looks like one of the only providers of this type of, because it's basically an arm's length for the local authorities in that the company does all of the due diligence of installers, financial checks, etc., and then runs the customer service websites for registering. So there's no sort of implications on the councils. That rate is what this scheme has been run for 12 years now in local authorities in England, and that is the sort of, that's a very, what he said was that was a very conservative take-up rate using figures they've had from the rest of the UK. But alongside the mail shot, which will go out to their sort of targeted group of likely customers, there'll also be some marketing campaign where people who may not have received the letter, for instance, can sign up on the website, and there will be work with the individual local authorities to highlight the campaign through social media to encourage take-up as well. The beauty of this scheme, I suppose, is that although we're paying out initially in the first year, for each of those the take-up, there's a the sort of local authorities get paid back £80, £80 sort of fee, which then essentially covers the cost. But to get it running, we need the sort of up the initial money in the first year.
Okay, did you want to come back, David?
Yeah, thank you for those answers, which are much appreciated. It's interesting to know that obviously Cardiff and other English authorities are doing the same. So, you know, not necessarily for now, but if the take-up rates are comparable to other areas, you know, that's fine. Obviously, we always want more. Everyone would want more take-up, but it's just to make sure that we're not an outlier. We're not an outlier on the low side, and you know the figures that we've coming out with are comparable take-up rate with other authorities and areas. So, thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, if I might come in. The very valid points obviously raised there, Councillor Howlett, and we'll note that, and when we've got more information, we'll come back to you and the committee as required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd just like to say how it's nice to see so much collaboration working, you know, across the region, and the projects all look very exciting as well in terms of electric, EV, and ultra low emission vehicles. Is very exciting stuff. So good work all around there. Good work and good collaboration. Thank you, and best wishes from me too as well for you, Darren, as well.
Thank you.
So that's, unless I don't think anyone else has anything, so we're going to move on to item 7. which is the draft regional transport plan, integrated wellbeing appraisal and regional transport delivery plan. And I think this is Stuart, is it, to take this?
Yes, Stuart and Mark are not available today, Chair. So perhaps if I do a general introduction, and then we'll ask Lee to take us through the summary document. Obviously, this is the next stage in the development of the regional transport plan. We've now completed the draft for consultation, which is obviously set out before the committee this morning. It's a fairly substantial and weighty document with some very detailed appendices, which are essentially broken down into two parts. We've got the regional transport plan itself and the regional transport plan, the delivery plan element of the consultation. Just to note that we are obviously working at the promotion and engagement plan around the consultation exercise, which is planned to commence around about mid-February. I think it's the 10th of February is our target date to go to consultation. It's a fairly, as I said, weighty document, and has been very much produced on a teamwork basis right across the four authorities. So a huge piece of work has gone in by the officers. And I thought it's probably worth mentioning as well, although Chris Moore has now dropped off the call, there are two other sort of parallel pieces of work that members will certainly be aware of. One of them in terms of bus franchising that's running in parallel with the development of the RTP. And at present, the Welsh Government are also doing a grants modernisation review in terms of how grants are processed and administered in the future, which Chris alluded to. So those two pieces of work could result in, you know, if there is agreement by the CJCs across Wales and leaders, that there may be additional functions in terms of financial administration, programme and programme delivery monitoring that could fall upon corporate joint committees in the future. Obviously, that's work that's currently evolving. There's been no agreement to that. But again, sort of gives us this uncertainty, as Chris mentioned, about you know, planning for those unforeseens in terms of holding back the reserves. So I just wanted to mention that to members on the call as well. So if you don't mind, probably now is an appropriate time to call Lee in. Lee will take you through a summary overview of the development of the plan and the next steps, and then we'll be open to questions. So
yeah, that's fine, David. We'll do that.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, and thanks, Dave, for that introduction. And good morning, everybody. I think, Dave, you've probably covered the salient points there, but I think just to emphasise that the draft regional transport plan, which is obviously the main appendix to the committee report that sets out the implications of the plan that Dave was discussing there, particularly around finance and delivery, which obviously Chris Moore has engaged with as we've moved through this this process, and the other topical area around bus franchising. I think where we go, Chair, is that I would highlight in the appendix, page 33, which are the main objectives of the regional transport plan. There are 6 of those, and they follow very closely, as per the guidance, the requirements of the Welsh Transport Strategy. So the first 2 objectives relate to the first priority of the Welsh Transport Plan, which is very much around reducing the need to travel. Now, that could be less journeys, it could be shorter journeys, and there's 2 objectives, numbers 1 and 2, around that. The second priority from the Welsh Transport Strategy is to look at how we travel in effect and trying to understand, can we get more people cycling and walking, encouraging public transport use, the rollout of low emission vehicles. Obviously that links back to the comments that Darren was making in the previous agenda item around the regional energy strategy and those local delivery plans that were being highlighted there. But the third strand of the Welsh transport strategy is effectively reflected in our objectives 5 and 6, which are around promotion of the plan. There's very little point in doing a lot of work building schemes, making interventions in the transport system without actually promoting that in the appropriate way. So I would highlight page 33 of the appendix to you as the principles that have gone through this committee and the CJC when we started to look at what was called the case for change last year, which sort of set the ground, the groundwork for this particular draft plan. I think just to highlight from page 34 of the plan, of the draft plan onwards, there are some very detailed policies there that I'm sure will attract comment in the session, grouped around those 3 priorities, the region's priorities, which are we went through the process with yourselves and other CJC and indeed the individual authorities of identifying economic development, the environment, tourism, etc., as the key priorities for the region in terms of attempting to bring this to bring a sensible policy base forward. So I think I would encourage you to look in detail at the policies there. We recognise that active travel modes of cycling and walking may not be suitable for everywhere in the region. We do have quite a lot of rural communities that need motorised transport of some description simply because of the location and the distance and the geography involved. So obviously that's quite important there. We recognise the statutory requirements and particularly around encouraging use of the Welsh language, accessibility to healthcare is another key element of this. So the policies in some ways set the framework. What we've then got is a long list of schemes, which is, as Dave alluded to, is the delivery plan. That's set out in Appendix 7 to the main regional transport plan document. So we've got the words and then we've got the list of schemes. As that currently stands, that is a long list of schemes. It's not been filtered in any way. It is the schemes that the authorities have been either working on, have ambitions to deliver, etc. So, and indeed some of the schemes that are listed there came from the public consultation exercise that we undertook in the summer last year. So there's a long list of schemes there. We do have the approach to filtering those schemes to understand the priorities. And I think just in terms of the scheme list, it's important to identify, firstly, there's an addendum been published on the website, which you may be aware of, which is a list of those region-wide initiatives and schemes that basically are either, all the authorities have wanted to pursue that type of initiative. So there's a regional list, but there's also an errata as well that has not been published, but I was going to give a verbal update today. Colleagues that are from Neath Talbot chair, there are 2 schemes that have been unfortunately overlooked in the list. There's a drainage scheme on Fabian Way on the approaches into Swansea, and that's related to the drainage of the highway that needs to be added to that list. And there's the Neath Transport Hub, which I know, David, you commented on yesterday to me in the email. So there's an errata there that we'll obviously correct for the CJC meeting next week. Final comment to make, I think, Chair, if I may. The plan is obviously subject to the usual statutory assessments. What is in the consultation pack at the moment is the scoping report for those statutory assessments. So we've got 3 statutory assessments. We've got the CJC's integrated impact appraisal. We've got the integrated wellbeing assessment that the Welsh Government require as part of the RTP process. And we've also, on the basis of advice from officers and legal colleagues, scoped out what we required for a strategic environmental assessment. So those are the three elements of that integrated statutory assessment that we need to conduct. So that's in the pack as well as one of the appendices. I think just to touch on the consultation, I know David touched on this as part of his introductory consultation. We are looking to go live, subject to comments from yourselves and CJC approval next week on the 10th of February. It will be at least an 8-week consultation. We may be able to stretch that to 10, but it's looking like an 8-week period at the moment. As you may recall, last summer, we carried out a mainly online consultation. This time we are going to spread our wings because it's statutory consultation. So there will be a number of in-person events that are being arranged around the region by Rachel Lewis and colleagues who are on the call this morning. There will be the online survey, the online information as before. There will be information deposited at certain key locations around the region in written form, so we can see that, and obviously with the usual translations to back that up. We'll also be conducting a further round of stakeholder engagement. So last time we went out to sort of effectively fact-finding consultation. We will repeat that exercise, obviously, with the draft plan on the table. Last year, we ran a number of effectively themed groups around, I think there was buses, there was rail, there was the education sector, social services, economic development, tourism, and so on. There was a number of theme sessions, and we intend to repeat those. Also, I think just to wrap up the issue of the delivery plan, and I think, David, obviously we've sent the delivery plan with this long list out to consultation. There is work to be done in rationalising that list, I think, rather than schemes dropping out, is to understand how they fit together, how the schemes are presented in the final regional transport plan. But also there is a process to come back to the individual authorities in May for the approval of the individual authorities to the list of schemes that are in each area, simply because the statutory responsibility and the powers to deliver the scheme still sits with the individual authorities rather than the CJC. So that probably reflects some of that, some of the CJC challenges that Chris and Councillor John were referring to earlier, in terms of we've got to evolve a process to do that. And we think the best way to deal with that is to have the individual cabinets endorse the schemes in their area before we then move to the CJC in June for final approval. I think that's about everything to say, Chair. Sorry it was rather long and rambling, but as David says, it is a complex and long document with lots of moving parts to it. So more than happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lee. No apology necessary. It's a very big document, as you said, and it's comprehensive and plan to try and coordinate and pull together the regional transport links. It's not easy. I know we did have one question. Councillor Percy, I know you were hoping to ask a question, so I'll bring you in if that's okay.
Yes.
And then Mark, I haven't forgotten about yours either, right, but I'll bring in Sean first.
It was more than one question, Chair. So
yeah, that carry on. If you you can list. I think if you ask them all, and then that's fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to suggest I was limiting you in any way, shape, or form.
No problem.
Thank you.
No, thanks, Dave and Lee, for that sort of introduction, because you've covered off a few of my points actually just in the explanation, and particularly I'd picked up the omission of the transport hub as well, so I was curious of that one. And I'd missed the regional list of schemes, so I've just had a flick through that while you were talking, Lee, and that again is it makes a little bit more sense now I've seen that. I'll pick up some of the specific questions and sort of points first. Just in terms of those sort of the policy pages. I noted two things. One on page 99 around active travel, and there's a note there at the bottom about ensuring the transport hierarchy will be maintained, which is fantastic, and that active travel is embedded within transport projects on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure the caveats needed. It probably waters down that sort of policy point. It's just my interpretation of it, but it just feels like it's probably not necessary for that to be there. And there was another point, because in some of the other policies, actually, there's specific mention of walking and cycling within them when they're talking about transport more generally, which again is very welcome because it should be cross-cutting. But on page 103, there's reference about a safe highway network, and there isn't mention of pedestrians and cyclists there. And I think it would just be useful to kind of sort of to strengthen that point to say that this is, it does sort of say all users in terms of highway safety for all users is a priority. But when they're actually talking about highways, often that is seen as a very roads and car centric sort of terminology. So I just think maybe there's a bit of work around just tweaking that word a little there. More generally then, the metro proposals, they're mentioned in the narrative here and there in terms of the South Wales Metro or South West Wales Metro. I always get them mixed up. There isn't really anything concrete in terms of any proposed sort of actions by the region on that. And I know it's a bit complicated in terms of where that's sitting, but I kind of want to flag that, and I'd be interested to hear how you feel that might interact with this plan. I'm just thinking, although the metro's a long-term project and there's a lot of uncertainty around it, actually within the timescale of this plan, 2030, I'd hope we'd be making some strides to see that implemented. And I just feel like maybe there should be a work stream kind of identified around that if there's enabling works or whatever. And I know it's been picked up in a couple of the schemes individually, but it doesn't seem to be that we've got a cross-cutting thing there saying that we're going to look at that enabling works for the metro. And then just specifically then looking at the schemes in the delivery plan, and you've covered this a little, Lee, in your introduction. What I'm trying to understand, obviously there's going to be you said it's a long list, and there's going to be some rationalisation. They've got to be prioritised and they've got to be assessed as well. And although the draft document refers to Appendix 5, Appendix 5 is currently blank in terms of the criteria and the assessment in the document we've had today. It's just a line there, sort of, there's like one sentence in there. So I don't know if that was an omission or whether that's something that's to follow. But what I'm trying to understand is, in terms of the schemes in that delivery plan, is that a live document that is going to be rolling and updating over the period of the plan, or will that be set in stone, this year and then delivered? Because obviously if the CJC is going to be vested the responsibility to administer the funds that were listed in that document, and I've heard the same rumours and conversations going round about that, it becomes really key what's in that delivery plan for all of our local authorities in terms of transport projects. And I want to understand a bit more about what we do know around how flexible that document is throughout that process. The other point I had was around the regional stuff. Again, I've seen now those regional projects, but you mentioned as well about rationalising some of the schemes in there, and I think, when you look at that long list, there's some of those schemes that probably just can go straight into those regional schemes. So you've picked that up, and that's welcome, because it felt like when I looked at it, like all the local authorities had just plugged in their existing work streams, and there wasn't enough of that collaboration. And now I've seen the regional projects and heard your comments, I'm a lot more reassured about that. So that's great. Okay, diolch, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Lee, comprehensive set of questions there for you to
indeed.
address.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly we can look at the case-by-case question on page 99. I think that obviously is dictated, I guess, by the circumstances, but certainly happy to look at that. And the same with the groups that are affected by the highway safety question there. Certainly peds and cyclists, and I know officers have been looking at some correspondence in relation to equestrians using the roads in terms of the safety of those particular vulnerable road users as well. So we will have a look at the wording on that. I mean, I think the only challenge is obviously quite a succinct policy, probably quite a challenge to list out lots and lots of types of user. I think, but we could certainly perhaps highlight vulnerable road users as a category to catch pedestrians, cyclists, the equestrians, as well. Certainly we can look at the wording on that, I think. Just in terms of the metro, there is an element of the scheme list that has got third-party delivered schemes, and clearly quite a significant element of the metro fits into that basket, as do the trunk road schemes across the region that we're aware of and have been attempting to promote. I think the important thing, Councillor Percy, is that obviously the National Transport Delivery Plan expires in 2027. So those third-party schemes in the list are effectively what I'd call markers for a debate about what the next National Transport Delivery Plan may or may not look like. So in some ways, the metro is implicit in there, as you say. But I mean, certainly we can look at how we can improve the signposting to the metro. Totally agree with that, and we'll take that away and look at that. I see Dave's writing notes furiously at this point, so we'll take that away and look at it. But obviously the challenge is, we know that the Welsh Government, dare I say, officials are standing there, sitting there with their red pen, waiting to strike out anything that talks about things that are not directly within the remit of the RTP. So the way we've attempted to present it is probably along that more subtle approach that you've highlighted there, where we attempt to build the idea that the Welsh Government elements of the network are actually the spine of the transport system, and actually the RTP will struggle to achieve its aims and ambitions if you don't have the metro in place. Now, the delivery plan, I think it's fair to say, although Welsh Government officials will not be drawn on this, the delivery plan has worked on a number of assumptions in terms of, there's progress on bus franchising, for example. There's progress on Metro Phase 1 around the Swansea and out towards Carmarthenshire issues, that first phase. That to our mind has been implicit all the way through, that there are progress on those items. As I say, I'm just conscious that Welsh Government officials are waiting with their in the wings with a red pen to strike through anything that talks about the metro and what decisions they've got to take. Hence, we come up with this way of listing third-party schemes as essential to the plan. I think, just to say, in terms of the delivery plan more generally, we have had, I dread to call it agreement from the Welsh Government, but we have had at least an acknowledgement that the way we're going to list the schemes and record them in the final delivery plan is rather to follow the local development plan approach, where you'll have a number of schemes that are absolutely essential for the plan to be delivered. You will then have a number of schemes that are desirable and enhance the plan, and then you'll have a basket of schemes that are actually schemes that will be worked on a more opportunistic basis. So we'll have three bands, plus obviously those third-party national government schemes as well. So that was the approach we were taking there. I do apologise about Appendix 5. I'm not sure what's happened there, so we'll take that away and investigate that. But Appendix 5 pretty much follows the discussion that we had in September, I think it was, last year, where we were highlighting that there was going to be a qualitative, a subjective assessment of the schemes and a numerical, quantitative assessment of the schemes, based mainly around deprivation data, population statistics, etc., where the air quality management zones are located, etc. Those factual issues effectively around the geography of a particular scheme. Obviously, a little more challenging when we get to area-wide, region-wide schemes, but certainly when we've got a geographic location for a scheme, we have collected a lot of quantitative numerical information, and obviously we can use that to assist in sifting the schemes there. So apologies about Appendix 5, Chair. We will investigate that and advise after the meeting as to what's occurred with that there. I think the regional projects, Councillor Percy, are very much that basket of schemes where all four authorities are pursuing an initiative. And I think we recognise that some of those are critical. I'll give you an example. Some of the bricks and mortar, the concrete tarmac pouring schemes are needed, but certainly we think that, for instance, a large programme of influencing travel behaviour is going to be critical. we can't obviously influence everyone, but a targeted programme influencing possibly by location and by mode of travel. So we may want to do a lot of work with schools, for instance, on their travel planning and access arrangements. We'd probably want to do a lot of work with large employers on their access arrangements, and the health sector as well. Obviously, they're looking at a new delivery model. Certainly in the western parts of the region, we'd certainly be looking to work with those organisations to improve access to their facilities through the RTP. So I think, yeah, those regional projects, although they look a bit of a catch-all, they're actually particularly important strands of the delivery plan. So I think that's covered everything, if I may, Chair, that Councillor Percy posed. And so we will come back about Appendix 5, so apologies for that.
Thank you for noting Appendix 5 as well. Sean, I'd seen your hand, Darren, but Sean, did you want to come back before bringing Darren in?
Yeah, just on a couple of things, and yeah, thanks again, Lee. That was some, really reassuring, comprehensive response. Again, there, I think just in terms of Appendix 5, I think if that could be circulated to the Scrutiny Committee after the meeting, I think that would just be helpful for us to look through. I don't know what the Chair's view is on that, but there may be some comments to follow. And then, yeah, in terms of like the regional projects, I think the really key thing there is about there's the opportunity to share good practice, isn't there, as well? We've got authorities doing good stuff actually, and others maybe a little bit behind the curve, and that particularly for transport, that consistency across the region is so important. Yeah. And that's one of the big opportunities there. One of the things that I just wanted to flag was around the amount of engagement with businesses around their infrastructure and engagement with staff as well. And I know through the planning system, there's a sort of very weak kind of transport plan thing that gets done, and they're barely worth the paper they're written on. I read hundreds of them over the course of being a councillor, and they're very much a tick box exercise there. And I feel like there'd be a good piece of work to be done. I don't know whether that's being captured within the project. I didn't see anything specific around that, but that might be something else to just scribble down if to consider, because actually that's something that's outside of our control. But we should be seeking to influence or maybe fund or support. Yeah. On the metro point, I know there's been some wranglings going on around where this sits and the responsibilities and all of that in the background. So I see where you've come from with it, but I think what it's maybe unintentionally done is almost kind of lower the priority of it when you take the document at face value as it's read. Sure. And I understand why that's happened, but I think anything you can do to, I'd rather just put something in and get it scribbled out than not put it in.
Sure. Yeah.
If I'm completely honest, and I think we've perhaps downplayed it a little more than I would have liked to have seen. But I get the reasons for it. But I'm just making that point because actually you are right. It underpins so much, and it is quite critical. And actually, that's not clear. It's not clear in the document. The assumptions we've made are X, Y, and Z. And I think maybe if that is the case, let's be clear about that and send a little signal to Welsh Government that bits of the plan do rest on that as well. Thanks again. Yeah.
I think, Lee, as well, it's important obviously there's the elephant in the room as well, the Freeport impacts across the region as well, which we've obviously referenced in the document. But again, it's making sure that that's got the right profile within the document as well.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Thank you, David. Darren, you've been very patient. Would you like to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Percy, for all your questions and input there. That's really helpful. I was just going to note, actually, that on this point of metro development, as well as the Welsh Government regional schemes, there are elements of the metro which are implicit in council schemes. So in Pembrokeshire's case, I have to use a Pembrokeshire case, sorry, we're developing transport interchange schemes which clearly link into the metro. But perhaps they're not in the RTP explicitly mentioned as being a metro project, but they, in our documentation here in committee reports, we do make those links so those elements are also feeding into the metro. And also the the metro is about an integrated transport proposal, isn't it? Really, we're trying to integrate the modes of transport here. So some of the other things that Lee was referring to in terms of the elements of integration, such as the links with active travel, influencing behaviour, and all those sorts of things, are things that councils are going to be involved in. And we're also influencing the bus franchising work as well through the stuff that we're doing with Act 2. So I'm sorry that's not perhaps implicitly clear in the RTP report, perhaps, but I just wanted to make those points. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, thank you, Lee, thank you, David, for the information. I mean, you know, as with everything that we've discussed this morning, the issues come down to resources a little bit as well, don't they? In terms of an RTP looking for less journeys and people doing things closer to home, that's all very well. But if facilities are closed close to home because of budget cuts, then actually it's quite difficult to see how the RTP can work effectively. So we still face the same overall question. Mark, thank you for putting your hand up. You're very patient there. I've forgotten to bring you in earlier, so I'll do it now before I keep rambling on.
All right. That's absolutely fine. Just want to say thank you to everyone who's inputted into this report, because it is, as you say, a very meaty, beefy document, which I can only assume is going to make it very hard to consult upon when you do go out next week, because there are so many elements that you'll want to be getting feedback from people on. So I just wondered if you might be able to talk us a little bit through that and how much money you're putting behind the consultation in itself. So the last year when we had the consultation and you got 818 responses, we had a very poor response, I think, from Pembrokeshire, 127. I think there was only maybe one press release and a couple of social media posts that sat behind that consultation. And I appreciate the big work is coming, and what you've told me about an 8 to 12 week consultation sounds really wonderful. But I think this is an opportunity to really enthuse people about transport. This plan really should be looking at revolutionising transport in this part of Wales, and I'm not quite getting that headline from the document itself. So there's lots going on. But I want to know how in 10 or 15 years my daily commute will be changed by this. And I think if we want to get some good feedback from people, we maybe need to kind of vision that, to kind of start putting out there on the table what modal shift means. At the moment, it's just government telling people to ditch the car, which nobody wants to do, I'm afraid. Not in my part of the world, even not in the towns and cities where there may be a load of transport options, but they're very difficult to navigate. So I just wondered, you know, how are you going to encourage people in the next 8 to 10 weeks to really take ownership of this and to get involved? So what does success in that consultation look like for you? And then I'm the Tackling Poverty champion in Pembrokeshire, and I think I counted 4 mentions of poverty in this report. Transport poverty is a problem not just in rural areas, which is indicated in the report. It's also a problem for people who live in our towns and need to get to the next town, which in the case of Pembrokeshire might be 30 minutes away, it might be 40 minutes away for a job, or it might be people living in West Carmarthenshire travelling to Swansea for work every day who couldn't possibly give up their car because it would take them far longer to navigate a bus connection that doesn't meet the train. You know, these problems we talk about endlessly. This report has to knock all that on the head. And AI. So big UK government discussion about AI. I haven't seen a reference to AI in this report, although there is a lot of discussion about technology in a broad sense. That will help people to feel like the transport network is reliable and they will have confidence in it. So using that technology to inform people about why the bus is late, or when the next train is actually arriving, or how long it's going to take to get from Pont Abraham to Haverfordwest. None of that technology exists. The M4 in Wales does not have any sort of indication about how long a journey time will take, very different to what goes on in England. But we should have the technology to be able to tell people what that average journey looks like to them. If Google can do it, we should be doing it. And the Carmarthen to Aberystwyth railway line, which I'm a big supporter of personally, how are we working with the Mid Wales Growth team deal in order to push that forward? So I understand that although it might end in Carmarthen, there are other people at play there, and how does that work? Sorry, a few questions.
Thank you, Mark. That's excellent. David, I assume you're going to hand that to Lee to answer those questions. Is that right? Hey, you're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies. Yeah, I mean, we'll ask Lee to comment around that, and perhaps on the Mid Wales growth plan. We need to pick up on that as well. But perhaps Rachel could give some insight into the comms plan and how we are going to approach that as well. They're really, really good points, actually, Councillor Turney, that you've highlighted. And we have had discussions, really, around AI and the technology that we need to consider. So, Rachel, would you like to start by talking about the comms plan?
Sure, yeah.
There we
So
are. Thanks,
we are going above and beyond what we did last summer. So we'll obviously do the continuation of the sort of key stakeholder engagement workshops in the run-up to the launch of the survey, and that will include community councillors, etc., as we did previously. We've also identified where we had gaps in last summer's survey with targeting, the younger generation. So we're going to put a campaign together there with the colleges and the universities across the region. And one of the things that we've started on just before Christmas, and actually some copies have come through in my email this morning, is we're going to try and do a bit of branding and have some sort of presence, because before we just use the CJC logo on things. So Greg Jones, who is in our comms team here at Swansea, leads the comms for CJC across the region. He's already had conversations with his 3 colleagues, and they are meeting next week to talk about how they can develop that comms plan. Also, I think Lee alluded to, we are going to be in the community a lot more with this round of consultation. There will be at least 2, maybe 3 face-to-face sessions organised in each of the council areas. So that will then be targeted perhaps to those areas where people, don't want to have to get a bus into the civic centre or into the town centre. We'll try and look and target those officers within each of the councils are working on and making decisions on where those face-to-face sessions should be. So we are up in the ante from last summer, but we would welcome any ideas, or if there's a specific pocket that you think we should be looking at, please email me directly, and we can try and target those if we need to.
Perhaps, Rachel, we can highlight the point that Councillor Turney made around the visioning, our ambition for that.
Yes.
That change, and be really key as part of that comms plan, I think. Well, essential, really. So Lee, on the difficult questions that I wasn't sure how to answer on the AI, clearly AI is brilliant, isn't it? And the things that I hear every day about what's happening around the country and around the world is incredible. So it's a massive opportunity for sure. But Lee, perhaps you can explain how those technologies will emerge through some of the work streams and some of the projects that we deliver.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I mean, I think the first observation to make is that AI should be business as usual. I think we all recognise that it's evolving at such a pace that certainly within the 5 years of the plan, which obviously start from April 26 for 5 years, that it will be business as usual within that time frame. And I think that's probably why there's probably not the emphasis on it that they should be, simply because it's something that authorities, the public, are going to be using as a matter of course. But certainly we need to bring that out, I agree. I think what I would say is that just in terms of one specific example there, obviously bus franchising, for example, would make the provision of information and an AI backdrop to that easier to deliver. simply because at the moment there's so many players involved with the individual bus companies and so on, all moving at different paces or not moving at all into the AI, the information space, as it were. I think bus franchising makes that easier. Equally, the challenge that we've got in the RTP is to record that in the appropriate way, because obviously, whilst government officials are saying, well, the legislation's not passed through the Senate yet, we know what the network will probably be looking like, and there's been a lot of work done by officers in conjunction with Welsh government officials and TFW on that. In some ways, equally as important, a number of those work streams about what bus franchising, what the nuts and bolts of it are still to be worked through. Now, we know Welsh Government officers and TFW are starting to work through those. So there's been discussions about fleet, for example, and how you improve the bus fleet in the region, as almost as an exemplar, because I think the common understanding is that South West Wales is going to be first in the pipeline on bus franchising. But obviously there's work going on behind the scenes about what that specification looks like. So there's the network planning side well underway. We've got some clear information coming from that. But then there's other work streams that we understand your officers are starting to engage with. So the fleet is one. Obviously, that supports the hydrogen initiative, for example, in Swansea, Neath and Bridgend. But the detailed nuts and bolts of that are still being worked through, and that's unfortunate. And obviously all without commitment at the moment, because as I say, the officials are the official view is that, well, the legislation has got to work through the Senate. Now, that's a challenge in recording that. But yeah, we'll certainly take the AI discussion away, Dave, I think, and understand where we can add AI into that. I think at this stage, it would be very difficult to define a specific AI project to put in the list of schemes, but I think it may come down to one of those regional initiatives where we add a regional initiative to actually say there will be investigation into AI and some of the things that Council Attorney was highlighting there in terms of what AI can achieve potentially in the lifetime of the plan, etc. I think just in terms of the vision, coming back to Rachel's point there, we did start with a vision that obviously in some ways then got distilled into the objectives, the 6 objectives. Now, we need to perhaps recreate that and use that in the consultation to understand. I think the messaging, though, has got to be very clear. I think, as you said, Council Attorney, active travel is not going to be for everybody. There are valid reasons why people will need to use cars, private transportation of some type, be it cars, vans, small lorries, whatever it may be. So there are valid reasons for those modes of travel continuing. I'm not saying we've got to fight the battles we can win, but I think we need to be very targeted about the mode changing aspirations, and that's why I think there's 2 strands to that. One, as you say, is the more built up areas where there is likely to be a choice available, but also it's about working with those locations and types of activity that create lots of trips. So the hospitals, the schools, the large employers, etc. And one thing that we are proposing into the budget of this, and obviously as Dave, Darren alluded, and Chris Moore alluded to earlier on, there's no certainty about budgets yet. The one thing we have had tacit agreement from the Welsh Government about is that there will actually be a development fund top sliced out of the annual funding to effectively deal with, and let me call them the known unknowns, as it were. So the Freeport and its precise impacts. We know the Freeport's coming, the precise impacts are being worked on. We know we're going to have to respond to that. I think the AI promotion and rollout probably sits with that as well, where we know that AI is there, we know it can do good, but actually we need to be very clear what interventions we're going to make. So we do have that proposition that the Welsh Government have supported unofficially, that we actually do have a top slice to the funding every year to allow the schemes that emerge, that we know that there will be some work needed on, to actually be funded and move those forward. I think the final point, Councillor Tierney, was Carmarthen to Aberystwyth. Now, I think we all know that in traditional transport appraisal and business case terms, Carmarthen to Aberystwyth is quite challenging. We know the study was done a few years ago and the numbers were very difficult. I think the challenge there is to some way probably follow some of the discussions I've seen around this recently, where we actually examine almost not what the social case is, but actually what that more strategic case is for the line, to understand, the wider economics of it, etc., beyond the pure transport case. Does this influence, for instance, the spatial portrait of the area that's going to come through the SDP? I think that's quite important, and that's a challenge because, of course, I was going to highlight that as obviously one of the risks that we're running at the moment is that we're developing a transport plan without the work on the SDP proceeding either in front of it or in parallel. Now, we know from what Chris and Stephen were saying earlier, there are valid reasons why that's not moving at the same pace as the RTP. So there are some linkages that need to be made there, I think, in terms of Carmarthen to Aberystwyth to present that more strategic view and what it could release in terms of economic activity, tourism, and so on. We need to update the narrative perhaps beyond it being a transport scheme. I think that's my view there. So it is in the list. It is recorded as a scheme that we may want to pursue. So I think that's in there. But you see, how do we change the narrative is the exam question there, I think, in terms of that one. I think that's covered everything, David. I'm not sure I've missed anything. I know you were taking some copious notes as Councillor Tierney was talking, so hopefully I've covered everything there.
Yeah, I captured the notes that we can pick up after the meeting. I can see, sorry, Chair, Councillor Percy's got his hand up to come back.
If you'd like to chair the meeting, David, that's fine.
Apologies, sorry.
Councillor Percy, would you like to come in?
I don't know if Mark wants to respond before I come in. I
was thinking about doing that, but Mark, Councillor Tierney, come on.
Yeah, no, I'm great. Look, I'm grateful for that feedback. Can I just emphasize the poverty bit again? Because there's a lot to talk about affordability in terms of transport sustainability, but the poverty issue here is how we unlock the economy, and that's really important. And just if I can indulge in one more comment that I failed to say when my millions of things I said a minute ago, just that in all of the transport hubs that are described in each of the local authorities lists there, it's very much about developing a railway station so that you can put bicycles there for people. I think there is a real opportunity here in terms of offsetting cost for these projects, whether it's the Milford Haven Transport Interchange or the Haverford West one or the one in Swansea or Gorseinon or anywhere, that actually we start thinking about these as nodal hubs, so that there is more than one reason to go to Haverford West railway station. It's not to park your bike and get a bus or a train to somewhere else. There's actually something going on that site too, and that could be a generator for the economy. It could create jobs. It could create businesses. I don't get a sense of that in any of what's been discussed thus far, but I think there is scope for that, because that will then mean there is more than one reason to go to that place, and that will then possibly encourage modal shift going forward. So you're going there for one reason. It could be a dentist, it could be a doctor's, it could be anything situated, co-located at that transport hub, but then it encourages people to modal shift. And that's something that I think, if we can't get it into this plan, has to start making it into the next one.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Good. It's really interesting, isn't it? The places like the Palace Theatre in Swansea, if I can move out of my own area for a minute, the development there with Tramshed Tech and the new business startup, again, it's a priority for them to be close to the transport links and have that fundamental link to businesses and also link to the wider economy. So great, thank you very much. Sean, I'd like to bring you in now, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the sort of the poverty point that Mark's made, and in particular in relation to the consultation. And we know that transport can be a major factor in inequality access to employment, and I think that's some of the points Mark's making. But I'm just thinking in terms of reaching the right people in the consultation, we really need to think about how we're going to get to those groups of people that are facing sort of transport inequality. And I think that's just a nudge really for Rachel there in terms of when you're looking at reaching out to certain groups. All of our local authorities have got employability schemes and employability teams and are working with people trying to get access to employment. We might want to think about those. There's people going to the job centre. We need to start looking actually those people that really need the investment in transport, and particularly public transport and active travel. It'd be really good to hear from them because they don't tend to engage. And even if that's not direct feedback, even if that is actually just some of the services that are working with them to feed in, I think that would just be really valuable, just as an evidence base, if nothing else. And then I only wanted to pick up on the point which kind of stemmed from the discussion around Carmarthen to Aberystwyth, but it is a wider point around how we invest in transport and assess the schemes. And there's a fundamental flaw in the kind of benefit cost ratio analysis, because it captures what's there now, how many people live in a place, but what it doesn't really factor in is what the growth potential is from investing in transport. It's this chicken and egg thing, isn't it? If you have a community that has one bus an hour, then you're going to have a car dependent community. But if you put in 4 buses an hour and then build some houses, people will move in because there's a bus service. And one of the things I think, just in terms of projects that we might want to think about, is some of those innovative things. Because I've been thinking about it in terms of our LDP. Actually, what we want to do in a Valleys community is put the bus service in first, even if there's currently not a huge population there, and then build the houses. So we're actually building communities from the ground up that are using public transport, because we're never going to do it the other way around. If we build the houses, everyone moves in and buys cars, we're not going to get them out. And that is a slightly different way of working. And that's something actually we've got potentially the flexibility to do within this framework if we want to trial things. And this period of time, actually, this 5-year period is a good time to think about that when we're looking at development plans and schemes. And I wanted to just kind of get that off my chest, because it works on a micro level, but it also works all the way up to the point you're making about a railway line to Aberystwyth or funding there. What is the potential future benefit? Actually, that's beyond the current BCR calculation, which is just, it is flawed.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I look forward to the idea in parts of Carmarthenshire we might have a bus an hour. I mean, we're lucky to get 1 bus a week in some of our rural communities. But Rachel, I see your hands up, so would you like to come back and respond to that question? I think it's a really important point about communication with some of our poorer communities. Are you on mute, Rachel?
Sorry, it's almost one, isn't it? Managed to do a whole meeting without being on mute. We did a little bit of this in the summer where we shared the links to the surveys with our housing team, who then posted it on, tenant forums, etc. We shared with tackling poverty teams, etc. So we'll make a specific reference to make sure that all 4 councils are doing that sort of networking within the service areas for sure. And as I say, if there are specific niches across the region that you guys can think about, please let me know and we'll try and do something specific to target them.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Excellent. David, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, no, just to thank you, Chair, and the members. I suppose over the last 8-10 weeks, officers have been really head down on this, into the nitty-gritty and detail. And this morning's scrutiny has been really helpful. I think there's been some excellent feedback. Sometimes you need to take a step back, don't you? Raise your head and take a final glance at the proposal. And some of those points that have been made by members are really excellent for us to take forward, particularly around the visioning and the engagement and marketing, and some things that perhaps we hadn't focused on enough around the AI. So just to thank you, Chair, and thank members.
Thank you very much, David. That's much appreciated. Excellent. I think this has been a very a very useful session. And thank you, everyone. And I believe we're noting it and
Chair,
having considered it. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, there are recommendations on page 47 of the agenda. 47. So to note the verbal progress, endorse the draft regional transport plan and supporting documents for public consultation. And there's 2 further recommendations as well, to endorse the latest regional transport plan development work programme. And the 4th recommendation is that members agree that the chair of the Regional Transport Subcommittee be granted delegated authority to make any amendments that may be necessary to amend the draft Regional Transport Plan prior to endorsement by the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee. So there are 4 recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Apologies. So we've got those recommendations there. Happy to take them all as one. Would anyone like to propose that we accept those recommendations? Everyone happy to do that?
Yeah, happy to propose, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Percy. I thought I was going to be left on a limb there for a minute, and we we're going to have controversy in the region. Anyone willing to second?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Turney, again for saving the day. Can we all vote if we support that, please? Okay, I think that's unanimous.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Having done that, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, David and Lee and Rachel for those contributions as well, and Darren. Sorry, you come in too. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the corporate plan 2023 to 2028 priorities update for 25-26, and I'll hand over to Christy Tillman. And just for members to note that this is published as a supplement to the agenda, so you should have this.
Good morning, thank you. The purpose of the report really is to seek endorsement from members on the corporate plan priorities for 25-26. As you may recall, we undertook a workshop on the 7th of November that allowed regional lead directors to look at the functions of the CJC and to propose their budget requirements and also their priorities against the corporate wellbeing objectives to deliver actions then for 25-26. So the workshop then has informed key priorities, and it's also informed the budget requirements that has been dealt with today as well. So the recommendation is to seek endorsement of those priorities from members, allowing us to go forward to CJC then for approval. And it is to note that as the corporate wellbeing objectives are not changed, it's the actions for the delivery of them that have been revised then. So we don't intend to go back out for consultation this year. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Councillor Davis, you've got your hand up. Is there a question? Or was that a legacy hand? Sorry, you're on mute as well. Where's gone?
It was a legacy hand, sorry.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you very much. So there are no questions, which is turn up for the books this morning. There's been quite a lot of questions on other things, so apologies, Christy. I don't think it's personal. All right, so therefore we did have the recommendation to accept and endorse the recommendations outlined in the report, which I assume, if there are no questions, we're all happy to do. So yeah, if nobody's going to put their hand up, I'm going to assume that's all going to go through.
Thank you.
Yeah, no hands, so we're unanimous in the support of you there. Thank you for that. Thank you for being on the call for that brief session on item 8. There we go. Wonderful. I'm going to move on to item 9, the forward work programme. Alison, over to you, please.
Yeah, Thank you, Chair. So it's just a couple of items to draw members' attention to. So going to the CJC on the 21st of January is the auditor's commentary of corporate joint committee progress. Members may wish to see that. It might be a useful information document for members to have a look at. And then also noted, going to the 18th of March, Corporate Joint Committee is the Economic Wellbeing and Regional Economic Development Subcommittee Programme Update, which members may wish to look at, and also the Annual Report 24-25. I can see, Chair, on the forward work programme, it says the final Regional Transport Plan is going on the 18th of March, but given the discussion that's gone on today, the need for consultation, I think when the officers said it would be going for approval in June, I don't think that would be ready, Chair, for our next scrutiny committee of the final draft version. So it's just the three reports at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from any members? No. Okay, so then I think what we'll do is leave it like that. But like as you said, the final regional transport plan will be to move forward, will it, to the next?
I believe so. From what officers have said today, Chair. I don't know if Christie can just confirm that's going to be delayed a bit further.
Sorry, as it stands now, it is in the forward work programme for March's CJC. So we're just clarifying dates really in terms of availability.
The regional transport plan, Christie.
Yeah.
Oh, right here. No, if it goes forward, then Chair, I'll liaise with you outside of the meeting.
Great, thank you very much. That's excellent. Note those changes, and if any members have anything they'd like to bring us to bring forward, please get in touch, and we can do that on email for the next meetings. Okay, so then moving on to item 10, which is urgent items, and there are no urgent items, and I've not been made aware of any during the meeting either. So I'd like to thank you all for your attendance today, for the contributions, which have been very interesting and informative, and I will look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much, and I'll close the meeting there. Thank you.
Thanks.